Welcome back to Hardball. In his primetime press conference speech last night, President Bush described a rebounding Baghdad.
Today, most of Baghdad's neighborhoods are being patrolled by coalition and Iraqi forces who live among the people they protect. Many schools and markets are reopening. Citizens are coming forward with vital intelligence. Sectarian killings are down, and ordinary life is beginning to return.
Time Magazine's Bobby Ghosh is in a position to know what life in Baghdad is really like. He lived in Iraq for 4.5 years, beginning in the months before the U.S. invasion. He was Time Magazine's Baghdad bureau chief, in fact, and now he's world editor for Time. Bobby, thank you very much for joining us. Give us a sense of your reaction when you heard the president's description of life in Baghdad.
Well, my first reaction, Chris, was that the president must have a very different definition of what normal means, because there's nothing about life in Baghdad that I would consider normal, and I lived there for 4.5 years.
Let me ask you what it's like as a journalist to get up. You get up in the morning. Do you have to have a car? Do you have to have bodyguards to get to work, to move around the city? What did you need just to do your job?
Well, I had it a little easier than most would because I look like this. It helps to look like a local.
Yeah.
But even so, I would not just simply get out and walk in the streets and in the markets without careful planning, without a couple of people with me, at least with discreetly hidden arms. When we travel with 2 cars, the second car carrying armed men to make sure that the first car was protected. And that is just journalists. Ordinary Iraqis have to travel around the city and have to go about their daily lives without any of that protection.
You know, one of the questions asked of General Petraeus and of Ambassador Crocker on Monday in the House hearings, I believe, because I watched it all day, was can a Sunni tribesman, just a Sunni person, man or woman, walk into a Shia area? What's your assessment?
Well, as long as he doesn't say he's Sunni. If a Sunni person walked into some neighborhoods like Shola or Sadr city and announced his Sunniness, he would meet immediate hostility. He may or may not be beaten up or killed. He would certainly be driven out. And there are some neighborhoods even within those larger districts where he would be killed on the spot without any questions asked.
So where do most of the American personnel over there, the military men and women, mostly men, do they stay in Camp Victory or the Green Zone? Where do they live? And do they ever get a sense of hanging around a marketplace or a souk or just sort of being part of the scene and the busyness of the town? Well,
since the surge began, American forces have been scattered around a little more. The majority of them are still in Camp Victory, but now there are, and the president was right about this, there are outposts in individual neighborhoods, but they are carefully guarded. Soldiers can't simply go out and hang out in a market. When they go to the market, they go in strength with armored vehicles and heavily armed up. When they travel through the city, but even when they do foot patrols, they have to be extremely cautious. They're reaching out a lot more than they did, let's say, last year, when they spent most of their time in the military bases. But even so, they have to be extremely, extremely careful. They can take no chance of death lurking at every corner, and people are just waiting for an opportunity to kill Americans, just as they are waiting for an opportunity to kill each other.
So an American plane in Baghdad, for example, and started walking around town, a family of 5, for example, 3 kids, like they do here in Washington, as you know, what would happen to them?
I think if they turned up in the air and announced themselves to be tourists, people in white suits would come and take them away. It would be insane. I think the customs and immigration people at Baghdad airport wouldn't allow them into the country. If you don't look like an Iraqi, and if you're not an Iraqi and you walk anywhere outside the Green Zone in Baghdad, any neighborhood, you're in extreme danger, not only to yourself but to everybody around you.
And that explains why journalists have a very hard time the story, right?
Yes. A long time, and if you have a bureau that's been there a long time, like Time Magazine, New York Times, then you have connections into the community. You can use those connections. Your local Iraqi staff help you get places, help you get information. But if a journalist were arriving, say today, who had never been to Baghdad before, it would be very, very difficult to get up and running.
What do you make of John McCain's visit to that market?
it was so stage managed that it defies belief. I mean, for all practical purposes, it was not really a visit. He could have been on a set in Hollywood. It was so carefully staged and managed, and the security was so all-pervasive. The moment he left that market, and with all that security with him, that market immediately became what it was before, which is an incredibly dangerous place. So I don't put any weight on that visit at all.
What do you think, just going through the thing we try to see through a glass darkly from over here, we hear about a civil war between Sunni and Shia, we hear about Al-Qaeda. What mix do you see in your mind's eye? What is the mess? What does it look like?
The civil war between the Shia and the Sunnis is the most dangerous, and the one that has the risk of sort of bringing the country apart. It's sort of already unraveling at great speed. You live in any country that long, you develop friendships, you have close friends, and it's the civil war that worries me the most, because I have friends on both sides. They remain friends with each other still, but I can see the strain on their relationships. And there are many friendships. There are marriages that have already been broken up. There are neighborhoods that have been united for 1,000 years, Chris, literally 1,000 years, that are now divided between Shia and Sunni, and former friends and former neighbors cannot reach across that divide to shake each other's hand.
Well, it's great to have your witness as a top reporter. Thank you, Bobby Ghosh from Time Magazine.